This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. Hello and welcome to today's Critical Thought. I am Josh Bycer, and thank you to 787 subscribers here on YouTube. We are getting closer to 800. If you haven't watched it yet, be sure to take a look at the Alone in the Dark Classic Let's Break that's going on the channel now. I know it may not be the best video quality, but we're dealing with a game that's over 20 years old, so unfortunately we're going to have to take what we can get. Before we get to today's Critical Thought, I got an important topic I want to ask you folks about. I've been putting together the idea of doing a program teaching people about game design using Super Mario Maker. And I've been pitching it to libraries and rec centers, and they love the idea, but the challenge is coming up with the actual hardware. We need the systems and the games. So I've been reaching out to major companies to see if they'll be interested in donating, but if that doesn't work, I've been thinking about going the crowdfunding option. I know I have the Patreon campaign already, but this would be specifically to get the hardware. To get the hardware that we need. So for those of you watching this, what would you suggest? A Patreon campaign or a Kickstarter? Simply so I can get the hardware and the games just to afford them so I can run this at like libraries, rec centers, etc. Anyway, let me know in the comments below. One other bit of news, if you're watching this as of Tuesday, October 11th, we're going to have a new developer live play tomorrow at 6:30 EST on the Twitch channel. Once again, that's GW Bycer. I'm going to be hanging out with the developer behind Star Vikings, which the spotlight is up on the channel from a few days ago. Very interesting game designed around accessibility along the same lines as like Plants vs. Zombies. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that, and hopefully we'll have a podcast interview with him real soon. Allergies are bothering me, so I'm going to take a sip. Now, with all that said, it's time to get to today's Critical Thought, and that is going to be the first of many talks about the history of platformers. Again, for those of you doing the Critical Thought drinking game, take a sip now, because this is a topic we can return to with any number of games, design, and mechanics. For today, I just want to talk a little bit about sort of the major elements that have defined platformers and things that have to be kept in mind if you're designing one yourself. Up there, we of course have Super Mario 3D World, and it took a whole lot of designing, iterating, and mechanic evolution to get to that point. When we think of the early platformers, Ghouls and Ghosts, or Ghouls and Goblins, Mario, and so many third-party titles, the original platformer design was built on what's known as committed jumping. Committed jumping essentially means when I, jump in the air, I cannot control my trajectory as after I press that jump button. What that means, of course, is if I didn't make the proper planning before I hit jump, I'm dead. I can't adjust myself in midair. I can't do anything to affect it. And for a lot of games, this presents some very interesting challenges. Ghouls and Goblins being one of the most famous ones. Even though it had the double jump option, the double jump only affected your trajectory when you press that button. Again, you can't alter in midair. So, like, imagine my hand being the character. So I would jump, and if I hit the double jump, I will do it again, but I will not be controlling it after each jump. When it goes right, committed jumping can be used in its own form of puzzle solving. The game Bionic Commando made use of it with the fact that you literally could not jump. All you could do was swing, and then use the momentum from your swing to leap across gaps, climb up, etc. The problem with this kind of committed jumping, though, is the difficulty. It puts a lot more pressure on the player, and some elements can just be very hard to get right. If you're trying to do a committed jump from a moving platform, or simply just hop down to something below you, committed jumping can just really screw you. Basically, the second you move off the platform, you drop, because you're not controlling your trajectory. Even games that didn't have committed jumping, such as Mega Man, also had that element. The second I drop, I immediately shoot down. Now, what we saw with the evolution of platformers, most of them went with non-committed jumping. This is where I can jump and I'm adjusting my trajectory in the air. So let's say I jump. I should actually use my right hand so it's easier for you to see. So if I jump, I can control myself as while I'm in the air. So if I either am too close, or I'm sorry, if I jump far enough or I jump too far, I can change things. And what's interesting, this also presented more challenge depending upon what the game designer wanted to do. Now you could have platforms set up at very weird positions and angles and force a player to make multiple micro adjustments in midair to land on them. Games like Super Meat Boy did this, and probably a whole host of indie 2D platformers. With non-committed jumping, this really became usually the standard for what we see from platformers, either 2D or 3D today. Mario has certainly evolved to have that with later iterations. But one of the things that we saw as the platform genre evolved was essentially more ways of providing a safety net to the player. And safety net design, once again, take a drink, is another topic in of itself. It's essentially mechanics designed to help a player if they screw up in some way. And one of the most famous examples of this from the platformer genre is simply the ability to hang on a ledge. You know, you jump, you miss it, and then you can sort of pull yourself up or drop down. This became popular in a number of platformers, both 2D and 3D. Some games use the hanging mechanic simply as, again, a safety net. You screw up on a jump, you can grab the edge of the ledge and pull yourself up, and you're safe. Others use that as a part of the platforming. Now you have to make jumps across gaps where you literally won't be able to make it unless you grab that ledge for dear life. This, of course, makes it harder to gauge just how far you can leap. Now, with platforming, we've already spent about 5 minutes, not counting my intro, talking about it, and we still haven't even gotten to the considerations you need to think about when you're building a platformer. Besides talking about committed and non-committed jumping, you also have to determine how the player moves. And this is a whole bigger topic. If you remember my talk about gamepads versus keyboard and mouse, I talked about the difference of a gradual with this analog stick and a black and white interface with a keyboard. Again, if you didn't watch that, the analog stick allows for fine adjustments, so you can move a little bit to the right, a little bit more, or go full on for run. With a keyboard, it's always on off. Either the key is pressed or it's not. When you're building your platformer, you need to decide how you're going to let the player control them, or how they're going to effectively control their velocity. If you are building your game around a fine scheme, again using the analog stick, then you must have gamepad functionality. Super Meat Boy, while playable, would be infinitely more frustrating if it didn't have gamepad support. If you're going for a more lax platformer, such as a puzzle platformer, where you press a button and the character has a predefined, basically walk, predefined run. So essentially, instead of them building up speed, the second I push the button down, he's going to move at his default walk. Or if I hold down the run modifier, he'll go for his default run. Then you can get away with a keyboard press. One of the things that we saw that was kind of interesting is that when developers try to translate that to the gamepad, they can run into troubles with the commands. Remember, this analog stick registers all 360 degrees of motion here. But if you're dealing with a on and off, or again that black and white kind of interface, you're only dealing with essentially 4 commands: up, down. I can't do right and left, unfortunately, because it's going to look reversed, but you get the picture. And one of the issues is, I should just keep this up with me for this whole video. Let's say I'm pushing diagonally up like this. Now to your end, the question is, am I pushing up? Am I pushing right? What is the game going to recognize? Again, it depends on how you're designing your engine and your control scheme. Another point you need to deal with, once you've established your move speed, you also have to deal with your jumping. And again, jumping in a platformer is obviously a pivotal element. Jumping doesn't feel right or it's off, your game's going to become frustrating to play. One of the things you have to understand as a designer is this is where that idea of creating a baseline or a foundation comes in. Once you establish that, let's say if this is the ground, this is my little guy here. Let's say the highest I can jump is here. Once I've established that, all my platforms and all my platforming must be built around that baseline. Because if I don't do that, then I'm going to lead into situations where I may place a platform so high up, the player will never be able to reach it. Or challenges will become more frustrating depending upon if I have committed versus non-committed jumps, how my motion's going to affect things. And again, these are the kind of things that Nintendo has definitely had to deal with and come up with solutions for with the Mario games. If you played or built any levels in Super Mario Maker, you know the challenge it is of coming up with something that can be easy to play versus something that's really hard to play. And one of the beauties of Mario Maker is the fact that you have to beat your own level in order to upload it. And there are times I made my level so difficult that it took me about 15 tries to beat my own level. And you know that's saying something when the creator can't beat his own design. It's almost like a Frankenstein-esque situation. But platforming, because it is such skill dependent on the player's end, needs to be very fine-tuned by the designer. Because we are essentially the masters of our own fate, we're going to immediately pick out any problems or sloppy designs. For instance, if I'm running and jumping, and let's say every time after I jump, my character stops for a full second, that's going to be very sloppy and very hard to plan around if your game is built around rapid platforming. You know, levels where platforms are dropping down and you have to make quick platforming jumps to and fro. Or to and from, I'm sorry. My allergies are bothering me today, and I am surprised I've gone through the last 13 minutes or so without sneezing. But again, this is a topic where we can branch off into any number of areas. And if you have any suggestions or something you'd like for me to tackle next for platforming, be sure to leave them below. But the evolution of the platformer has definitely been built around giving the player more degrees of motion, moving away from committed to non-committed jumps, and figuring out how to balance all that in a 2D or 3D space. The Mario games, especially the 3D ones, are some of the best platformers I've seen pretty much of all time. The levels are built to make full use of Mario's abilities, but you're not tested on all of them. And I'm sure I talked about this in a previous critical thought, so I'm not going to get too much into detail, or we'll be here for another 20 minutes. Even a game like Super Meat Boy, despite being very challenging, also felt really great in your hands. It was once again built on this fine degree of motion and making micro adjustments as you're running, jumping in the air, and then controlling your descent. Or sometimes your ascent if you're using those damn fans that everyone hated. But we'll wrap up the critical thought here because again, there are just so many areas for us to tackle next. I hope you enjoyed things. If you'd like to support Game Wisdom and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign, which should be linked somewhere here right now. And once again, I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Thank you to 787 subscribers here. When we get to 800, I'll have a little celebration for you. Once again, be sure to check out tomorrow's live play. If you miss it, it will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube in a few days. But other than that, thanks for watching today's Critical Thought. I will see you all tomorrow with more great content here and on GameWisdom.com. Have a great day, folks. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.